Okay, everybody, welcome to the very first episode of America Held Hostage podcast. We've got my friend Jon Hinton and I. We're going to be bringing you the daily news and a little bit of commentary, some reaction to what's going on out there in the world. It's crazy, but Jon, I'm glad we could do this, and I'm glad we could be spending a little bit of time each day and just getting the news out there for what people need to actually understand.
Yeah, my inspiration for this was Glenn Beck's daily coronavirus update that he started about a month ago. So he'll have like 5 minutes where he goes through daily data and things that happen each and every day. So I was seeing that a lot of stuff that is not being covered in the mainstream media is being lost, but it's being reported on other websites like the UK Mail or the Wall Street Journal. Maybe even the New York Times when they don't have a bias. So what are the stories that are pertinent to conservatives and Christians that are happening with coronavirus right now? So since we're all in quarantine with the Constitution being burned right now, then we have some time to actually get out some real news rather than partaking in the fake news fear porn that's overtaking us right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think before we kind of hop into some of the headlines, I think it does beg the question of, we are all in quarantine. The show's called America Held Hostage. What's your take on, as a conservative and as a Christian, on the reaction to coronavirus?
At first I bought into it. I live out here in New Jersey, so we're 20 miles away from Philadelphia, in a suburb in southern New Jersey. We're 70 miles up the road, up the turnpike is the New York City area, Newark and NYC, Brooklyn, all that. So we're right in the epicenter along the I-95 corridor. So the first week I thought, okay, this is going to be terrible. And then when I started to realize our hospitals weren't seeing a big surge in cases. There were questions in the data modeling where, if you've been following this news, the Imperial College in the UK, their data modeling along with the IMHE at the University of Washington were predicting anywhere from 500,000 deaths in the UK and 2.2 million deaths in the United States if nothing were to happen, to where I saw a graph just this morning that the state of Iowa was predicted to have 1,500 deaths by August 4th, according to the University of Washington. And now they've rescaled that data modeling to 480. The Imperial College data went from 500,000 to 10 days ago before British Parliament. That data scientist had to say that he expects only 20,000 deaths to happen, and that the peak wasn't going to occur in the UK 2 to 3 months from now, but 2 to 3 weeks from then. So you're seeing that there's a lot of people with agendas and worldviews that they're having to reassess what they thought was settled science. And it's basically freaked all of us out to where we've, because of fear, given up our constitutional rights, and half the world is in quarantine and 90% of the states are in some of stay-at-home order. And that's greatly concerning to me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that kind of leads us into like one of the articles or one of the stories that you wanted to highlight, which was dealing with this whole Google tracking, just everyday citizens and that sort of thing. What's the breakdown of that story that people need to actually understand?
Okay, so and we'll be posting links to these stories that we have. So this isn't stuff that I'm finding where it's fake news. This is from the Wall Street Journal, dated April 3rd by Rob Copeland. And I'm just going to read parts of it. So Google will help public health officials use its vast storage of data to track people's movements amid the coronavirus pandemic in what the company has called an effort to assist in unprecedented times. The initiative, introduced by the company late Thursday night, uses a portion of information that the search giant has collected on its users, including through Google Maps, to create reports on the degree to which locales are abiding by social distance measuring. The mobility reports will be posted publicly and be shown online. Now, that's just basically the highlight of it. You can read the rest of the story at the Wall Street Journal. But basically, what concerned me 3 weeks ago was that the Israeli Mossad had basically found a backdoor into the 9 million citizens that had smartphones in Israel, and they were tracking people's movements. And if you came in contact with someone that had tested positive for coronavirus, then you would get a notification on your phone that would say that you had come into close contact with someone who tested positive with coronavirus, and you needed to self-quarantine for 14 days. So they were starting to track people's movements. Well, now Google is going to do that in over 131 countries through your cell phones in order to make sure that people are social distancing and staying at home. There's also a related story that came out from the New York Times yesterday, and we can link to that too, where there was a map of the U.S. showing county by county who was staying at home and which people were not. And that's just an invasion of privacy. And it's also I also begin to question, where does the data end and the worldview begin? Because we're going to tank an economy and we're going to limit people's freedom of movement. So we're taking away people's constitutional rights of freedom of speech, of freedom of assembly. But we're doing so all for the sake of public health. So I guess rights or privileges when a virus is involved.
Yeah, well, and that's the crazy thing that I feel like about whenever there's a big major crisis here in the United States, is that there's always this big power grab, and it seems like our rights are always being taken away. I always use the example of after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act, which was a huge invasion of privacy there. But the fascinating thing to me as well about this whole technology side of things is, is that this isn't really anything new, except that it's a coordination between one of these tech companies, Google, and the government. Because, Google already tracks all of our movements. They already know everywhere that we go. They've already got pinpoint everything. The way, from what I understand, the way that Google actually is able to trace traffic in the United States on Google Maps is by tracking each of us individually, and then they can see where, how fast or slow we're going on the freeway. And so then when you see red, green, yellow on the freeways,
right,
it's because they're tracking you and I as we're going along. They can see where we slam on the brakes, where we slow down, that sort of thing. So it's not like this is anything new, but what's new is that it's the partnership between the private company feeding information to the government, and that just seems like taking the invasion of privacy to an extreme.
Oh, yeah, absolutely it does. It's one thing for me to get real-time data about when there's going to be like a 5-minute delay, but then you're wanting to use that data to say, well, is he following ordinance? It seems like a backdoor to a social currency, a social credit system that was starting to be used in China last year. We can tell if you're actually abiding by. We can tell if you plebes are actually listening to what us cultural popes are telling you to do by just following your movement on your smartphone. And if you don't, well, then you will be made to care.
Yeah, I'm getting flashbacks to the Captain America. I think it's Winter Soldier, where like literally they're trying to punish crimes and enforce crimes before they are actually committed, and they've got tracking on pretty much everybody in the entire world, and then they can swoop in when it looks like somebody's going to commit a crime, then they arrest them preemptively. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening right here. Is like, no, you're too far away from your home. We're gonna crack down on you before you actually do anything wrong. It seems like that's what's happening here. So what's the next story you wanted to cover?
The next story would be from Pennsylvania, from TribLive.com. State police cite a Pennsylvania woman for going for a drive amid a stay-at-home order. So this is in York County. Pennsylvania. A woman this week was the first person in Pennsylvania to be cited for violating Governor Tom Wolf's stay-at-home order, according to state police. The 19-year-old woman was given a non-traffic citation for allegedly going for a drive, according to a citation obtained by PennLive.com. Pennsylvania State Police spokesman Ryan Tarkowski said Friday the woman initially was pulled over because of a vehicle code violation. Warnings have been issued by troopers in various areas. Troopers can use their discretion during situations to decide if a citation is warranted, but they have been encouraged to use contacts with the public as a way to promote voluntary compliance. At this time, law enforcement is focused on ensuring that residents are aware of the order and informing the social distance practices that should be used. While the order is mandatory, voluntary compliance is preferred. The woman was that also relates to a story in Laredo, Texas, where we found out that if you violate the stay-at-home order in Laredo and you're not wearing a mask, you could be fined $1,000.
It seems, I don't know. It seems a little excessive, but then again, I'm out here in California being quarantined for weeks on end with the threat of 6 months in prison if we if we break the stay-at-home order. So it's, I'm living it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think when it comes to this, I feel like it's a good debate that I think conservatives could be having in. Does the government have a role in dealing with, let's say, an outbreak like this? So, and I know a lot of us are kind of questioning, okay, is it as serious as the government's claiming it to be and that sort of thing? But let's just take them at their word. Let's say it's as deadly as they say it's going to be. 5% of everybody who gets coronavirus is going to die, that sort of thing. Does the government have the right, or should they come in with these stay-at-home orders if it's for the safety of the people?
Sounds like are we going to do things for the greater good? Do I think I believe that the role of government biblically is that leaders have been empowered by God to protect the righteous and to punish the evildoer. That's what Paul says. So do they have an obligation to protect their citizens? Yes. But I continue to say we didn't suspend the Constitution and your constitutional rights when it came to the Spanish flu, when it came to World War I, World War II, the Korean War. We went about our lives. Everyone knew. This is the first time where scientists are going against the actual data that shows that you have to let a virus run its course in order to build up herd immunity so that you have the antibodies moving forward to be able to combat it. So now we're going to socially isolate half of the world's population, because 4 billion are now in quarantine all over the world out of 7.7 billion. That's according to the New York Times last week. We're gonna socially isolate and think that that's gonna cause the virus to die out. This is the first time it's being tried. But meanwhile, in America, your God-given constitutional rights and personal liberties are being suspended. And we're being told that they'll be given back to you once this is over. History shows that when people who want power and control take away your liberties, you never get them back without a fight.
Yeah, we're seeing that out here in California too, because I believe it was just the other day, our governor Gavin Newsom actually, came out and flat out said that we're going to take advantage of this situation and turn California into an even more progressive state. And I'm thinking, are we not progressive enough? But he's literally talking about giving the government more power, more control, more authority, and using this specific situation with coronavirus in order to extend governmental control on the state level, which it's already out of hand out here in California, let alone what's that going to look like next year or 10 years down the road if we keep going down this path of taking advantage of a crisis like this.
That's exactly right. You're already a state that has 40 million people. You already have a $42 billion budget shortfall. You've already redone your primaries to where it's not a Democrat and a Republican that go against each other. It's the top two vote getters. So that's usually a Democrat versus a Democrat. And you can't even fix your own homeless populations in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Sacramento, but yet people are having to stay at home and be quarantined. Meanwhile, farmers can't get into the fields, and now we're looking at food shortages later on this summer because places like Iowa and California that are the bread baskets of America, farmers aren't allowed to get into the fields and plant. It's chaos run amok, and Scripture says God's not a God of chaos; He's a God of order. So whenever I see if the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, but yet Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy, then what you're seeing run amok right now is people are doing Satan's bidding. It's an overflow of a battle in the heavenly realms that's happening on an earthly plane, and that's why we need to pray for Josiahs to rise up and leaders to actually tear down the evil and wickedness that's in the high places, because it's going to destroy us.
Yeah, and I think that an important thing that we need to remember too as conservatives is that the government does have a role in all this, but I think it's more to advise and more to be able to do research and then guide a lot of the states and local governments in how to actually deal with a lot of these things. But we also have to remember the Constitution specifically states that Congress shall make no law restricting these things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, all these things that are under attack. And so that it's just like the Constitution is just becoming a suggestion. It's no longer the law. And I keep saying, if we're going to go down this route, we need to actually physically go amend the Constitution, not just pretend like it doesn't exist. So if you can amend it and you want to change it, you have the right to do that. But there's a process to do that. It's not just pretend like it doesn't exist. Right.
A story 3 weeks ago where the mayor in Champaign, Illinois, wrote an executive order that said that they could shut down gun stores and also confiscate guns door to door because of a public health emergency. That law is completely unconstitutional. It violates your God-given First Amendment rights that were founded in the Declaration of Independence and then codified into law through the U.S. Constitution. And that mayor should be thrown out of office, and charges should be brought up for, I believe, for treason. It's all we swear an oath. Any person. I worked for the census in 2010. You have to swear an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You make that kind of a law, I have to question if you're actually a friend of the Constitution or a domestic enemy. And because the enemies that we were told that we had with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they wanted to destroy your way of life and your constitutional means of living. Well, that's the same threat. Am I saying they're a terrorist? No. But am I saying that their ideologies are terroristic in nature when it comes to coming to with laws like that? Absolutely. Yeah, because it's a threat to your liberty and way of life.
Yeah, and you would think in a national emergency or an emergency of any kind, isn't that when you should be able to arm yourself to protect your family? I mean, they're talking about. They're concerned, and this is why supposedly, according to reports, the National Guard is being moved around the country, is preparing for outbreaks of violence and theft and riots in the streets, because they understand that people are not going to want to be on lockdown for months on end. We'll do it for a short period of time while we're trusting that the government is doing their job to prepare to actually defeat this thing. But it's not going to work if we're going into July and August and we're still at locked down at home. And I think that they're being prepared for riots and theft and burglary and all this kind of stuff. So why can't we prepare to protect our homes if all of a sudden, if the bad guys realize that nobody's armed, do you think that they're going to have any reason not to break into somebody's house?
No, we're finding out that in New York City alone, New York City police, I saw over the weekend, have said that there's a 30% uptick in burglaries and thefts. There's also a 30% uptick in domestic spousal or child abuse claims. Google is saying that there's a 42% uptick in drinking, people going to liquor stores in the San Francisco area. And this is what happens during any sort of national disaster or any sort of emergency. People begin to feel like they're out of control or that they have no control, so then they begin to act out in violent means. I have a source inside a Philadelphia area police station, and this source told me 2 weeks ago, and then reiterated it over the weekend, they are beginning contingent. They've been told to stand down, just like in Philadelphia. In this police station, they've been told to stand down, and that petty thefts, anything that has nothing to do with a violent assault, they've been told not to arrest. Just take a call. Don't worry about it. They've seen a 30% uptick in burglaries in the area. And they have also been given contingency plans that they need to begin to prepare for what it would look like if there's riots and looting in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that source is telling me that they're very on edge right now because they don't know. This could break either way. We could go back to where life was and people could start going back to work. Or if this lasts until the end of the month, they're afraid that this could start to break down into social chaos. Yeah, and then as we're let's go into the final story that you wanted or that you had pulled up to cover, and then let's dive into that a little bit. Well, another thing that I thought was interesting. We'll end it with some brevity, a little bit of levity for the day. Everyone knows 700 founder Pat Robertson. The man is nearly 90 years old and had a great run helping to feed the faith of millions, allegedly feed the faith of millions around the country and around the globe with CBN, Christian Broadcast Network, and the 700 Club. But on Friday, during an appearance with the 700 Club, Pat Robertson blamed the coronavirus on, of all things, oral sex. And I quote, "Some of these youngins are doing all kinds of unnatural things with their sex organs," said Robertson. "When people do that, they transfer all kinds of chemicals from ladies' private parts, and that's where I think the virus came from. Not from a Wuhan wet market or a Chinese medical bioweapons lab, but from a woman's hoo-ha. And that's where I think the virus came from. We never had this kind of thing when I was coming up, but no one was committing oral sex back then. We should note that Pat Robertson previously blamed 9/11 on witches and lesbians. And I just want to add that after reading this story, it causes me to begin to question the biblical doctrine of the perseverance of the saints. Why? Because of senility."
Well, see, that's the thing, is that Pat Robertson is the Christian version of Joe Biden right now.
That is, yes. Yes.
Just completely off his rocker, makes absolutely no sense, and totally losing it, and yet his handlers are putting him out there on TV to make these crazy claims that make literally absolutely no sense whatsoever.
It's true. It's true. And it's sad that the man had a good run, but now other people are just using him for their own devices.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Robertson. I mean, at what point is he not going to be in the news? Because I mean, we just need to stop reporting on him because people stop watching him because he literally makes absolutely no sense.
He doesn't. It's not because of being a culture warrior anymore. Whenever he comes into the news, it's usually because he said something that puts his foot in his mouth.
Yeah.
And it makes the rest of us Christians look bad because then they're like, well, why would I want to go to church if people think like he does?
Exactly. Which not to jump over to another story, but related to Pat Robertson dealing with Joe Biden and all of his craziness that he's been doing when he's going on TV and that sort of thing. I just want to put out there, I've got a theory as to why they're allowing a guy who's clearly suffering from like dementia or Alzheimer's or just totally losing it because of old age, and they're letting him go on TV and make these claims. And I think what they're doing with Joe Biden is that his handlers know, okay, he cannot be president, right? So I think what they're doing is they're putting him out there on TV to make him look as bad and as crazy and losing it as possible. So that way, and then once the convention comes, this is my prediction. This is what I think is going to happen. I don't have the gift of prophecy. Don't have anything like that. This is just my educated guess. I think
just some discernment going on.
Yeah. My theory is that they're going to have a doctor come out just before the convention and diagnose him with dementia or Alzheimer's. So that way he backs out, and then they're going to bring in Hillary Clinton. That's what I think that they're setting all of us up with Joe Biden, and I think they're intentionally putting him on TV to make these crazy statements because they know he's losing it, and then they're gonna come in, usher in Hillary Clinton. This is how they're gonna do it.
Do I think it's Hillary Clinton? Maybe, maybe not. I do believe that you're going to see that there is going to be some sort of change at the top of the ticket, or they're going to try and prop Biden up next to the jukebox. Weekend at Biden's is what I call it, and give him the nomination, but they're going to put someone that they actually want to be president 6 to 12 months after he maybe wins. To then he has to have the 25th Amendment used on him to get him out, or he has to resign, and the vice president takes over. Then that vice president can appoint whoever they want to be the vice president when they take over the office. At this point, my prediction would be Trump. I've said this privately. Trump probably has a 10-day window to get the economy to start back up and people start going back to work. If he lets these unelected officials like Fauci and Birx run his public policy, he's going to lose a lot of conservatives. And he has probably the next 10 days to begin to put his foot down. And if he does, he'll probably win re-election. But if he doesn't, he's probably going to lose because he's almost lost me, because I'm afraid that he's following data models and fear porn rather than trusting his own gut. And you have to be able to balance the two. This is his Churchillian moment. This is his Dunkirk. People saying, well, we either have to fight to the death or we have to surrender. And Churchill said, no, we can retreat and fight another day. So he found a third way. Trump has to find a third way because the false binary choices he's being given with is leading us to social and economic ruin if he continues down that path.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so the way that we're going to kind of close out the show for everybody watching is every day, both John and I are going to kind of give our closing statements, and we can kind of basically have a couple minutes to talk about anything that we want, uninterrupted. And so, John, we can start with you because I know you had some stuff prepared that you wanted to make sure that we talked about. So we'll close it out with you, and then I'll come in with my closing statements, and then we'll wrap it up, and then we'll be back again tomorrow.
Awesome.
Take it.
So you can find me on Twitter at @jhinton_. I don't have a Facebook, but @jhinton_, and I retweet a lot of news and give my commentary every once in a while. So the commentary that I have was a thread that I created Saturday after I'd had a back and forth with someone that was a part of Iowa sports radio media. And he was basically shaming people because Iowa doesn't have a stay-at-home order, and 600 people showed up at a horse auction, and they weren't socially distancing, and it's a rural state. And I thought, if those people want to live their life, go ahead. You're taking that risk every day, whether you drive a car, whether you are going out to work during flu season, that you could come down with something or get struck by lightning or be hit by a car and you die. So that's how I view coronavirus. I'm not a virus denier. Socially distance, wash your hands, hand sanitize, do all those precautions, but don't stop living your life because of the fear porn. That's where I'm at. I'm not going to sacrifice my constitutional rights because you're scared. But this person wanted to, and he was acting on social media in a way that he was shaming other people and being a social media Gestapo. So this is where I commentated about what he was doing, and then it went on into a rant that I wanted to share with all our viewers. Sad to see that someone who was probably cyberbullied and mocked himself acts that way towards me, all because I don't buy into the fear porn of Wu flu, and I live here in the epicenter in New Jersey. The other that I refer to lives in Iowa. Most in Iowa that I follow on here are Twitter liberal sports media figures. Why? Because I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan and I like local sports coverage. But these media figures want an Iowa shutdown to save the state from Wuhan coronavirus, and they're shaming others in the state who aren't social distancing and staying at home by becoming a social media Gestapo mob. These leftist media types believe in constitutional rights until a public health emergency says those are only privileges until further notice. These people support the right to choose for a woman, but not my body, my choice when it comes to living life and not buying into the fear porn. These Iowa liberal sports media types support the experts who say help flatten the curve, but not the intelligence experts who came out at the CIA last week and said that the Wu flu most likely came from a Chinese bioweapons lab and not just a Wuhan wet market. They support data models that now have been proven false. They want to shut down the country in order to save their own lives, but they're not figuring into account the lives that will be lost from abuse, hunger, suicide, and depression due to job losses and social desperation. They do this because, just like in this person's case, they've been worked over by the spirit of the age progressivism that runs among us. And without eternal perspective, they unknowingly follow and worship government, trusting the state to provide comfort and sustenance by trading in personal liberties for temporary security. Rudderless, without the enduring hope that makes men free, they're lost when they lose family members to death, are afraid of their own mortality during these uncertain times, and they don't know what to do without their daily distractions in life like movies and sports. I pity them, for I'm reminded of Jesus looking out over the crowds with compassion and being reminded that they are like sheep without a shepherd. They peddle facts, not fears. They trust authorities without question, even when those facts are proven false over and over. They virtue signal over how much they're staying home and saving lives, but they've said nothing about saving lives before this when it comes to the worldwide sex trade, abortion, spousal and child abuse, and rampant poverty in third world countries. Scripture says that professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Many at this time need real facts that are based in logic, reason, and actual data. But yet, these same people say that you and me are the real science deniers because we believe in the hard science of life at conception, gender, and race, and that none of them are fluid or up for debate. These are the same people who don't believe that there's a God, but they believe in the existence of little green men and that we evolved from goo and monkeys who fling poo at each other. They're captives and chained to their own godless worldview, literally representing the scripture that says they are the blind, leading the blind. Pray for anyone like this and correct them in love with truth and facts, because the truth is on our side. We worship a Jesus who says, I have come that you will know the truth and that the truth will set you free. Because it's the truth that sets men free, and we as followers of Christ have the words of truth and life that a lost and dying world, now searching for light and hope, needs so desperately right now in the midst of utter turmoil and chaos.
Yep, and that's a perfect way to really describe everything that's going on, and that was great. One thing that I wanted to talk about as we're kind of closing out as well is that the thing that always happens in our country during a crisis is that the left and the authoritarian, power-hungry politicians, they are constantly looking to take away more rights, and they hijack every single crisis for their own purposes and their own motivations and their own ulterior motives. And we're seeing this in the state of California. We're seeing this with, we saw this with Nancy Pelosi trying to sneak in funding for abortion during the whole big bailout. We see example of this over and over and over again. And as conservatives, this is the time where we need to be able to articulate our conservative values and not give in to big government solutions when we have a problem like this. And the reason is that, like we were saying during the show, it's never temporary. They're always going to extend things out indefinitely, possibly even permanently. And so right now is where we as conservatives have to rise up, articulate our point of view, articulate what the Constitution of the United States says, so that way when we get out of this crisis, all of these big power grabs that we're seeing right now do not end up being permanent. Right now, we can't change the fact that the government is taking over. We can't change the fact that the government is locking us down. We can't do anything about that right now. But what we can do is we have a voice. We're able to vote. We're able to put in people that are constitutional conservatives. So that means we have to be able to articulate our views and elect people that will not back down when they are faced with big government solutions. You know, we've seen that with I believe his name was Thomas Massey. I believe he was the only Republican that voted against the bailout bill. I know Rand Paul would have voted against it if he wasn't quarantined for having COVID-19. There's a handful of people that will take a stand and will do things, and we need more of those people in office and in power. And not to turn this into a big promo, but this is one of the reasons why some of my friends and people that I'm working with, we started an organization called the American Conservative Movement. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get, almost to a certain degree like a Tea Party type movement where we can bring conservatives together around constitutional values and educate them, unify them. We're not telling you who to vote for, but what we're trying to do is get you the information so that way you can go out there and you can actually implement things based on your values. And so the way that we're kicking things off is on April 18th, which is a Saturday coming up. We're going to be putting on our very first online conference. It's going to be called the Saving America Conference. We've got a great lineup of people like Greg Locke, Michael Johns, who's the co-founder of the Tea Party. We've got Matt Shea, who's a representative up there in Washington. Ken Peters from the Church of Planned Parenthood. I mean, the list goes on and on. We've got Jerry Wayne, the guy who got into an argument with Joe Biden over AR-14s. We've got a great lineup of guys. But the main thing that we need to do is we need to unify around conservative constitutional principles. And that's where understanding the world that's going on, understanding the Constitution, understanding conservative values is so vitally important today. So that's my closing rant. But yeah, John, I'm glad we could do this, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow, seeing what news pops up. And this is a fun time to kind of go through things, and there's always something crazy going on out there.
I just want to say, if anybody comes across that's watching that they find something that they think would be interesting, find us on Twitter. I think it's at Jeff the GK for you.
Yep.
If you find some news that you think would be interesting, tweet it at us or tweet it at me at jhinton_, and we'll run it by each other, and you might see your piece of news on the show. But by the way, verified sources. I don't trust anything that comes from like Gateway Pundit or Conservative Treehouse, any sort of blog. It needs to be hard news. So if it comes from a verified source, we need to be very careful right now as Christians that if we are purveyors of truth and we hold to truth, that then what we're sharing is not fake news, but that it's actual truth in what we're actually sharing and reporting. And that's the only thing that I would advise. Make sure that whatever you're listening to, consuming, or sharing, that you verify with 2 or 3 sources that it's actually true, and it's not just something that was screen captured from your mom's board on Facebook that was shared to her by your Aunt Gertrude.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum that up. So as we're wrapping up, for anybody that's out there, if you want more information on what we're doing here at the GK, you guys can go to GateKeepersOnline.com. We've got a lot of information, articles coming out all the time, podcasts coming out all the time. I think we're having like 3 podcasts coming out today, 2 or 3 more coming out tomorrow. At 12 o'clock Pacific time today, I'm having Mindy Robertson on my podcast, Conversations with Jeff. I'm sure that'll be a crazy epic episode going on there. So you guys can tune in there. And again, more information, gatekeepersonline.com. If you're interested at all in anything that we're doing over at the American Conservative Movement, you guys can go to americanconservativemovement.com. Sign up for the email list. We've already got thousands of people that have already signed up. Really excited about that. We've got a lot of really cool plans with that. And make sure you guys go check that out as well. All the links to all the articles and the news stories that we're talking about, John's going to send over to me. I'm going to put them in the description down below, so that way when it goes up on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, all the good stuff, that will be available to you as a resource. So, but yeah, John, I'm glad we could do this. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m., and I'm sure there's going to be more crazy stories.
Yeah, and I'll close by this. Joab told his brother Abishai, with the Syrians and Ammonites all around them, that, brother, if the Syrians are too much for me, then you'll come and help me, and if the Ammonites are too much for you, then I'll come and help you. Now, brother, be courageous, and let us play the man for our God and for the cities of our God, and then may the Lord do what seems good to him. Victory now for the church is not going to be the way that we viewed it before in our culture. It is going to be standing firm without wavering upon the hope that we confess, because he who promised is faithful. And we need to redefine victory by standing firm upon our principles and upon the Word of God. And we hope that this podcast is going to be a little bit of an encouragement in that in some crazy times.
Exactly. So yeah, everybody like, subscribe, all the good stuff. We will be back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we'll have a few more news stories to cover. Send over any suggestions or anything that you guys see out there, and then we may just cover it. So, but yeah, we will see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.